A luxury dealership made the mistake of underestimating Big Shaq's daughter. But the silence that followed, that was legacy in motion. Next day, a billionaire father's Rolls-Royce pulled in without a sound, but its presence said everything. No drama, no headlines, just a quiet move that shook the ground. Because respect isn't demanded, it's built, and when giants move, the world remembers. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The California sun poured down like honey across Ventura Boulevard, painting every surface in warm gold. It was one of those spring afternoons where even the air felt expensive. Jordyn O'Neal pulled into the dealership's parking lot in her slate gray Jeep Wrangler, the same one she'd driven since high school. She parked away from the front entrance, out of habit. She liked her space, and she didn't want her car mistaken for what she could afford today. The dealership was called Titan Auto Gallery, glass-walled, chrome-trimmed, polished within an inch of its soul. The kind of place that sold dreams with leather interiors and six-figure stickers. Jordyn stepped out of the Jeep with quiet purpose, 19, confident, independent, wearing clean white sneakers, a navy blue essentials hoodie, minimal makeup and diamond studs she'd bought herself. Her curls were pulled into a soft bun. She didn't carry a purse, just a phone, her driver's license, and a platinum Amex tucked into the back of her case. She had researched this moment. She had planned it. She was ready. The glass doors swooshed open with an artificial hum. Inside, the air smelled like chilled espresso and fresh wax. Jordyn smiled at the front desk girl, a blonde in a skin-tight pencil skirt and a blazer with the dealership's logo stitched in gold. The girl didn't smile back. Her eyes flicked down to Jordyn's hoodie, then to her phone, then away. "I'm here to see the RS7 you have listed," Jordyn said with polite clarity. She had seen it online the night before. A jet black 2022 Audi RS7 with carbon accents. A beast. Her dream car. She knew every spec by heart. The girl glanced toward the floor manager's desk. "You have an appointment?" "No, I checked the site. It said walk-ins welcome." The woman tapped a few keys with deliberate slowness. "You said the RS7. Her tone stretched the sentence like taffy, soft with skepticism. "Yeah, the black one." A man in his mid-30s with slicked back hair and a gold watch approached. His name tag read Brandon. Jordyn could smell his cologne before he even spoke. "Hey there, sweetheart. Looking for someone?" he asked, lips tilted into a practiced half-smile. Jordyn extended a hand. "I'm here to check out the Audi RS7. I called earlier." He didn't shake her hand. He just looked past her, as if expecting a dad or boyfriend to appear from the parking lot. "You looking for a test drive?" "Just window shopping. I'm buying. Today. If I like it." Brandon's eyebrows flicked up, a subtle dance of disbelief. "Well, we've got a few interested buyers on that model. High-end vehicle. Not exactly an impulse purchase." Jordyn smiled coolly. "That's why I've been thinking about it for months." He gave a sharp chuckle. "I mean, it's close to $140K, with the carbon package. Just making sure we're talking the same." "We are." He gave her another once-over. His eyes landed on the phone in her hand, and lingered just long enough to signal doubt. Then he nodded vaguely, and motioned toward the car section. "All right, follow me." They walked in awkward silence, his loafers clicking on the marble tile, her sneakers soundless. When they reached the glossy black Audi, Jordyn's heart jumped. It was even better in person. Sleek, aggressive. She circled it slowly, hands in her pockets, absorbing every line. She opened the driver's side door gently, inhaling the scent of new leather and German precision. She could see herself in it. Owning it. Not leasing. Buying. That was the plan. She turned to Brandon. "Can we talk numbers?" Brandon raised an eyebrow. "You sure? We have other models that might be, well, more reasonable. We've got a great deal on a Q3 fully loaded." "I'm not here for a Q." He glanced at the front desk, where the blonde receptionist was whispering to another employee. Something shifted in the air. Jordyn felt it, that microscopic drop in temperature. "Well, all right," Brandon muttered. "Just give me a second. I'll be right back." He disappeared into an office. Jordyn waited, checking her phone. Her friend Ava had texted, "Did you get it?" She didn't reply yet, not until she had keys in hand. Minutes passed. 5. Then 10. Brandon still hadn't returned. She looked over toward the receptionist, who now avoided eye contact entirely. A younger guy in a dealership polo stood by the vending machine, watching her too closely, whispering into his headset. Jordyn's stomach tightened. Something didn't feel right. Then a different man walked toward her. Heavyset, balding, cheap cologne and an angry walk. His name tag said sales manager, Rick Donovan. "Miss, I'm gonna need you to step outside." Jordyn blinked. "I'm sorry? You're making our staff uncomfortable. We've had complaints about someone loitering near the high-end vehicles." She stared at him. "I've been waiting for Brandon. He told me to wait. He's busy with a client now. We're gonna have to ask you to leave." Her voice was calm but sharp. "I'm a client." Rick crossed his arms. "Do you have an appointment?" "I didn't need one. Your site says walk-ins. Welcome." "Well, you're welcome to come back with an appointment. And someone who can co-sign with you. But for today, we're done here." Her throat went dry. She felt the heat rising, not in her skin, but in her chest. She stepped forward, voice low. "You don't know my name. You don't know what's in my account. You don't know anything about me. But you think I don't belong here?" Rick looked around dramatically. "You're making a scene now. I'm making a point. Ma'am, if you don't leave right now, I'll have security escort you out." People had begun to glance her way. A couple near the BMW display frowned in confusion. The receptionist whispered something again, eyes wide. Jordyn looked Rick in the eye. "You just made a mistake." Rick smiled without warmth. "I don't think so." She turned, walked calmly out the front doors, head high. The California sunlight didn't feel warm anymore. She didn't cry. Not yet. But something had been bruised deep inside her. Something tied to pride and presence, and years of watching her father teach her what dignity looked like in the face of small-mindedness. As she reached her Jeep, her phone buzzed again. "Ava. Girl, you get it?" Jordyn stared at the screen, then typed slowly. "They wouldn't even show it to me." She didn't press send. Not yet. She sat in the car, hands on the steering wheel, unmoving for several minutes. Her reflection in the rearview mirror didn't show rage. It showed something colder, something steadier, a calculation. Her eyes weren't tear-filled. They were clear. Then finally she sent the text. Later that evening, somewhere 15 miles across town, a basketball echoed in the driveway of a quiet gated estate. One bounce, two, then the heavy rhythm of a dribble broken by stillness. Shaquille O'Neal stood alone at the hoop in his backyard, dressed in a loose t-shirt, cargo shorts, and house slippers. The ball sat under his palm like a sleeping animal. He wasn't playing. He was thinking. Shaq didn't need much to process things. No entourage, no press statements. Just motion, breath, and silence. That night, he hadn't spoken much over dinner. Jordyn hadn't said anything either. Just that her day had been whatever. But Shaq had been a father too long to miss the signs. The way she didn't eat much, how she didn't play music on her Bluetooth speaker like she usually did, how her smile didn't quite meet her eyes. He knew pain when it was hiding in a corner. He sank a quiet free throw. The net whispered in response. He picked up the ball again, staring at the sky as dusk pressed its hand over the city. He remembered being 19. He remembered the stares, the murmurs, the way they smiled at your money, but still flinched at your skin. Money didn't change the rules. It just changed the rooms where they got broken. Shaq walked to the patio and sat beside his mother, Lucille, who was peeling oranges into a bowl. She didn't speak either. She handed him a slice. They sat in silence. Then she said, "You know she ain't right." Shaq looked up. "She told me," Lucille continued. "The dealership, what they did. She ain't want you to know." Shaq nodded once. "She still got the receipt from the listing?" Lucille raised an eyebrow. "You gonna go down there with a camera crew and shame 'em?" Shaq's smile was slow. "Nah, I don't fight fire with fire. I just make sure the next time they see her, they don't get the chance to forget her name." Lucille placed a hand on his. "And let him remember it loud." He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The game was already in motion. Quiet. Intentional. The kind of move that doesn't show up in highlights, but rewrites the scoreboard anyway. The next morning, Jordyn sat with Lucille on the front porch, sipping lemonade from a mason jar, her fingers tight around the glass. "I didn't want him to know," Jordyn said quietly. Lucille just rocked slowly in her chair, nodding. "He gets this look," Jordyn continued, "like stillness, but heavy, like the whole world could burn and he'd just keep walking." "That's how giants walk," Lucille replied. "They carry too much to stomp." Jordyn looked out at the driveway, where the Rolls-Royce Phantom sat in its garage bay. untouched. I could have handled it myself. You could have, but that's not the point. Jordyn turned toward her. Then what is? Lucille placed her glass down with finality. The point is you shouldn't have had to. The words sat between them like an open wound. And sometimes the best way to show them was to let the world learn who they underestimated. The sun dipped low over the O'Neal estate, casting elongated shadows across the manicured lawn. The evening air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine, a fragrant reminder of the approaching summer. Jordyn sat on the wide front porch steps, her elbows resting on her knees, hands clasped together. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of the day with relentless precision. The sting of humiliation still clung to her, a persistent ache that refused to be soothed. She had walked into that dealership with confidence, ready to claim a milestone in her life. Instead, she had been dismissed, judged, and ultimately cast out without so much as a test drive. The weight of it pressed heavily on her chest, constricting her breath and fueling a simmering frustration. Behind her, the screen door creaked open, and the familiar shuffle of slippers against wood announced Lucille's presence. Jordyn didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Her grandmother's aura was as comforting as it was commanding. Lucille eased herself into the rocking chair beside the door, the rhythmic creak of wood against wood filling the silence. She studied her granddaughter for a moment, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way her foot tapped an anxious beat against the porch floor. "Something's eating at you, baby girl," Lucille said finally, her voice a soothing balm against the evening's unrest. Jordyn sighed, the sound heavy with unspoken words. She hesitated, the urge to confide warring with a stubborn desire to handle things on her own. But the weight was too much, and Lucille's presence too grounding. "I went to a car dealership today," Jordyn began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Wanted to buy that Audi I've been saving up for." Lucille nodded slowly, encouraging her to continue. They didn't take me seriously." Jordyn's voice wavered, the memory igniting fresh indignation. "Treated me like I didn't belong there, like I was wasting their time." Lucille's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something ancient and fierce flashing across her features. She rocked slowly, the motion steadying her thoughts. "Ain't the first time," Lucille murmured, her tone laced with a mix of weariness and resolve. "But maybe it'll be the last they try with an O'Neal." Jordyn turned to face her grandmother, confusion knitting her brows. "What do you mean?" Lucille sighed, the sound carrying the weight of generations. She reached for the pitcher of lemonade, resting on the side table, pouring a glass with deliberate care. The ice clinked softly against the glass as she handed it to Jordyn. "Drink," Lucille instructed gently. "Sometimes a cold glass of truth goes down easier with a little sweetness." Jordyn accepted the glass, the condensation cool against her palm. She took a sip, the tartness grounding her, pulling her back from the edge of her spiraling thoughts. Lucille settled back into her chair, her gaze fixed on a point in the distance, as if she could see the past unfolding before her. "Your daddy," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "He's faced his share of doors slammed in his face. Didn't matter how big he was, how much money he had. Some folks only see the color of your skin, not the content of your character." Jordyn listened intently, the familiar cadence of her grandmother's storytelling wrapping around her like a warm blanket. "When Shaq was about your age," Lucille continued, "he wanted to buy his first car, saved up every penny he earned, walked into a dealership, head held high, ready to make his mark." She paused, the memory vivid and raw. "They laughed at him, told him he couldn't afford the air freshener, let alone the car." Jordyn's grip tightened around the glass, her knuckles whitening. The injustice of it all ignited a fire in her belly, a shared indignation that spanned generations. "But he didn't let that stop him," Lucille said, her eyes gleaming with pride. "He walked out of there, head still high, and promised himself he'd build a legacy so strong, no one could ever question his worth again." Jordyn swallowed hard, the lemonade suddenly tasting bittersweet. "I don't want Dad to know," she admitted, her voice small. "I want to handle this myself." Lucille turned to her granddaughter, her gaze penetrating and filled with understanding. "I know you do, baby, and I admire that strength. But this is personal for him. It's not just about you or that car. It's about every time he's been made to feel less than, every battle he's fought so you wouldn't have to." Tears welled in Jordyn's eyes, but she blinked them away, refusing to let them fall. I I wanted to prove I could do this on my own. Lucille reached out, her hand warm and reassuring on Jordyn's knee. Handling things on your own doesn't mean carrying the weight alone. Sometimes sharing the load shows more strength than bearing it in silence. The words settled over Jordyn, sinking deep into her bones. She nodded slowly, the fight within her giving way to a reluctant acceptance. As the evening deepened, the two women sat in companionable silence, the rhythmic creak of Lucille's rocking chair, a soothing lullaby. The stars began to pepper the sky, each one a testament to resilience, to enduring light in the face of darkness. Jordyn took another sip of her lemonade, the coolness soothing her parched throat and weary spirit. She glanced at her grandmother, a silent question in her eyes. Lucille smiled softly, as if reading her thoughts. We'll figure this out together, baby girl. O'Neals don't back down. We rise. And in that moment, Jordyn felt the strength of her lineage coursing through her, a river of resilience carving its path through the bedrock of adversity. She wasn't alone. She never had been, and together they would ensure that the world knew exactly who the O'Neals were. The night air was thick with contemplation as Jordyn lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The conversation with her grandmother replayed in her mind, each word etching deeper into her consciousness. She had always known her father's journey hadn't been easy, but hearing it framed through Lucille's perspective added layers she hadn't fully grasped before. Sleep eluded her, each tick of the clock amplifying her restlessness. Finally, she threw back the covers and slipped out of bed, her feet finding the cool hardwood. The morning came slow. Gray light filtered through the clouds and laid itself gently across the estate grounds, like a breath held too long. The air felt off just slightly, but enough for anyone tuned into the silence to sense it. Something had shifted, something unseen but undeniable, and it moved through the O'Neal household like the distant hum of an approaching train. Shaquille O'Neal stood barefoot in the kitchen, a mug of black coffee in one hand, the other resting flat on the marble countertop. The rest of the house was quiet. Jordyn had left early, slipping out before sunrise. Lucille was still upstairs, most likely praying or humming something from the old gospel records. But Shaq, he was still listening, not just to the stillness in the walls, but to the echo of a sound he hadn't expected to hear the night before. Jordyn's voice, low hushed, heavy with something she hadn't meant to carry alone. He hadn't intended to listen. He'd come down for water, the floor cold beneath his feet, the quiet too loud to sleep through. That's when he heard it. The porch creaked under the weight of two voices, his mother's grounded like earth, and Jordyn's tremulous like glass under pressure. He stayed hidden in the dim corridor near the kitchen, not eavesdropping out of curiosity, but caution. Fathers knew the difference. What he heard struck deeper than anything loud ever could. It wasn't the details. It was the ache under them. A dealership, disrespect. A girl trying to stand tall in a world that wanted her small. And his daughter, his baby girl, believing for even 1 second that she should carry that alone. He didn't step out onto the porch, didn't interrupt. He waited until the voices faded into silence, then turned around and went back upstairs, the weight of it settling in his chest like sand. Now in the hush of morning, he still hadn't spoken about it. He wouldn't, not yet. Words were easy. Reaction was expected. But legacy needed patience. And power, real power, never had to announce itself. He drained the rest of his coffee and placed the mug in the sink. Then he walked toward his study, a wide, quiet room with high ceilings and dark wood shelves lined with championship memorabilia, books on leadership, and framed family photos. He sat at the desk and unlocked the bottom drawer, pulling out a slim, leather-bound notebook. Inside the notebook were names, numbers, places, connections he didn't often use, but always kept. He flipped to the page marked T. The handwriting was neat, minimal. He picked up his phone and called. Tyler. A pause. Shaq. Damn, man. It's been a minute. Too long. You good? I need eyes on a dealership. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Which one? Titan Auto Gallery. Ventura. Specific or just general? Specific. I want to know who was working yesterday, who interacted with customers, who made decisions. I don't want anything public. Not yet. Got it. This about Jordyn? Shaq didn't answer right away. Don't worry, Tyler said. You never called unless it mattered. I'll keep it clean. I want the truth, Shaq replied quietly. No spin. I don't swing unless I see the court.
They hung up without pleasantries.
The kind of call built on old trust, not small talk. Shaq leaned back in his chair, hands clasped over his stomach. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, feeling the silence fill every corner of the room. It wasn't anger building in him. It was precision, focus. He had learned long ago that outrage when left raw could be wasted, but when tempered, when honed, it could become something unstoppable. He stood and walked over to the window, looking out across the back lawn to the court where he had shot hoops the night before. The net swayed slightly in the wind, as if waiting for him. He didn't go out there. Not today. Instead, he turned from the window and moved through the house with intention. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Every footstep its own quiet drumbeat. He stopped at the front hallway, glancing at the framed photo of him and Jordyn at her middle school graduation. She was beaming, arms wrapped around his waist. He remembered what she'd said that day, whispering so no one else could hear. One day I'm gonna build something they can't ignore. He had smiled, kissed her forehead, and replied, "Good, I'll make sure the ground's ready for it." This wasn't just about humiliation anymore. This was about foundations. Jordyn had taken her first step into adult independence, and they had tried to shove her back in place. That wouldn't stand. Shaq spent the rest of the morning reviewing the dealership's public information, ownership, financial ties, corporate affiliations, legal history. He didn't need to dig deep. He just needed to know the angles. Power respected preparation. By noon, Tyler had sent a secure folder via encrypted link. Inside, a timeline of the dealership's staffing over the past 48 hours. Video snippets from parking lot cameras, social media logs, and even a screenshot of an internal text thread between employees. Mocking Jordyn's walk, her hoodie, the fact that she thought she could afford something real. Shaq read it all. His hands didn't clench. His pulse didn't spike, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He clicked open a file with a video clip. Jordyn standing beside the RS7, touching the door handle, speaking calmly. Then Brandon, the salesman, walking away from her. A minute later, Rick Donovan arriving, pointing toward the exit. Jordyn leaving with her chin up, never once raising her voice. Shaq watched that clip 3 times. Not because he didn't understand what happened, but because he wanted to memorize the poise. He picked up the phone again. This time the number he dialed belonged to someone high up, someone on the board of the dealership's parent company, a man who owed him a favor from a charity merger 6 years ago. The call was short. "I need an off-the-record meeting." "When?" "Tomorrow morning." "You got it." He hung up. Still no tweet, no public statement, no appearance on daytime talk. This wasn't about creating noise. It was about correcting course. That evening, Jordyn returned home just before dinner, slipping through the foyer with a quiet hello. Shaq was in the den, reading, but he caught her in his peripheral. He didn't call out to her, just listened. She lingered in the hallway, hesitating. Then her footsteps moved upstairs. Shaq didn't follow. He knew she needed space. He knew the sting was still fresh. But he also knew the steps had already begun to shift under the surface. Tomorrow would be different. Later that night, Lucille entered the den holding a folded sheet of paper. She handed it to him without speaking. He opened it. A list of employees who had interacted with Jordyn, scribbled in her tight, tidy handwriting. She remembered their names, Lucille said. Didn't say it outright, but she was paying attention. "I thought you might want this." Shaq nodded, folding it into his notebook. "She still don't want you to get involved," Lucille added. Not as warning, but observation. "I'm not getting involved," Shaq replied. "I'm already in it." Lucille sat beside him, not asking further. She had seen this look before. The slow burn, the glacier that moved without noise, but carved mountains in its path. "Just make sure they don't turn this into some pity story," she said finally. "Jordyn don't need sympathy. She needs room." "She'll get it," Shaq said, voice low. "And they'll feel it." He stood, kissed his mother on the cheek, and walked out of the room, his steps as heavy and measured as a drumbeat no one had learned to dance to yet. The next morning was clean. Shaq dressed in muted black slacks, a soft tee, jacket with no logos. He didn't wear his championship rings. He didn't need them. Power didn't always need its medals. Tyler arrived at 7 sharp driving a blacked-out SUV. They said little during the ride. Downtown traffic moved slow, but Shaq's mind was elsewhere, already halfway through the meeting, already building moves, 3 steps ahead. They arrived at the executive office on the 24th floor of a building, that looked like money and smelled like old contracts. The man Shaq had called, Derek Vaughn, met them in a private conference room. Nervous smile, sweating through his collar. I didn't know, Derek said quickly. They didn't run her ID, they didn't log the interaction. I swear if I'd known. Shaq held up a hand. This ain't about me, he said. It's about my daughter. Derek nodded, swallowing hard. You own the franchise agreement on Titan Auto Gallery. That means their conduct is your liability. I understand. They violated your brand. Yes. Shaq slid the printed employee list across the table. These are the people who made those decisions. Derek skimmed the names. Here's what's going to happen, Shaq continued. You're going to terminate their contracts, quietly. No drama. And then in 1 week you're going to reopen that dealership under new management. But you're not just going to apologize. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. You're going to sponsor a program in Jordyn's name. A mentorship initiative. Black women in business, finance, tech. You're going to fund it. You're going to promote it. And you're going to make damn sure every person who walks into any one of your dealerships from now on gets treated with equal worth. Derek's mouth opened, then shut again. He nodded. And if I don't? Shaq stood. You won't have to worry about me tweeting. You'll have to worry about every media outlet asking why Shaquille O'Neal just pulled all advertising from every dealership tied to your board. Derek stood, offered a hand. Shaq shook it once, on the way back to the SUV. Tyler glanced over. You're calm for a man who just flipped a corporation. Shaq shrugged. I told you, I don't swing unless I see the court. Tyler laughed once. And when you do, you dunk. Shaq smiled. Just a little. The sun was barely cutting through the morning haze when the matte black Rolls-Royce Phantom slid silently into the lot of Titan Auto Gallery. It didn't announce itself. There was no screech, no bass-pumping music, no entourage hanging out the windows with cameras, just a whisper on rubber as it glided into a space near the front entrance. Not the customer section, not the valet lane, just parked, perfectly centered, impossibly still. Inside the dealership, it was just past opening. Sales reps were still warming up with bad coffee and aimless chatter, scrolling phones, adjusting ties in the glass reflections of seven-figure cars. Brandon, as usual, was talking too loudly to a middle-aged couple near the Porsche display, his sales tone already several notches too eager. Devon, the youngest on the sales floor, was straightening brochures near the reception desk when he glanced up, his eyes catching something off. The car! The finish alone screamed money. Not rapper loud, but the kind of wealth that didn't care who noticed. It was all matte, no chrome, no flash, just darkness wrapped in elegance. The custom rims were jet black with subtle gray trim, the kind of machine that made you lower your voice without realizing it. And Devon didn't recognize the driver until the man stepped out. He was huge, not just tall, monumental. Shaquille O'Neal, in person, didn't need introduction. But the man who stepped out of that Phantom wasn't dressed for attention. No tailored suit, no statement watch, just basketball shorts, Nike slides, and a faded gray hoodie pulled low over his head. No swagger, no posing, just stillness. Devon blinked twice, then leaned toward the receptionist, his voice a whisper soaked in disbelief. Yo, that's Big Shaq. The girl looked up, confused. Then followed Devon's gaze. Her mouth fell open, just slightly. Brandon didn't notice it at first. He was too busy pitching a payment plan on an M5 that neither husband nor wife seemed remotely convinced by. But then the mood shifted. The noise thinned. A strange hush swept across the floor, and Brandon turned to see what had stolen the air. Shaq walked through the front doors like a gust of wind, not fast, not loud, but inevitable. And once inside, he didn't speak. He didn't look around like a celebrity, expecting applause. He moved like he was looking for something, or someone, but already knew exactly where it was. He walked slowly down the showroom path, past the chrome-polished Jaguars, past the lineup of performance Audis. A few customers whispered to each other, nudging spouses, some fumbling phones into pockets like they didn't want to be rude, but couldn't believe what they were seeing. Brandon stepped forward with a rehearsed grin, unsure, masking confusion with sales instinct. Hey there, sir. Welcome to Titan Auto. Looking for anything in particular? Shaq didn't stop walking, didn't respond, just gave a faint nod, barely a tilt of acknowledgement. His eyes moved across the floor like radar, scanning, calculating. Brandon's smile faded. Half-inch. Devin stood by the receptionist, still frozen. Dude, what's he doing here? No idea, the girl muttered, her voice hushed. Shaq stopped in front of the black RS7. The same car, the one Jordyn had come to see. Still there. Same position. Same price tag neatly perched in the windshield, like it hadn't tried to rewrite someone's worth a few days earlier. He stood there for a full minute. Then he crouched. Not to inspect the wheels. Not to check the trim, but to look closely at the asphalt, like he was remembering something. Reading something no one else could see. Then he stood again, and took a slow, deep breath. The dealership manager, Rick Donovan, had been watching from the second-floor glass office above the showroom. He recognized the body language, knew the face, and his stomach dropped. He scrambled to the stairs, muttering under his breath, waving over one of the interns. Move, now. By the time Rick made it to the floor, Shaq was already making his way toward the front desk. Devin straightened up, unsure whether to step in or stay out of the way. The receptionist fumbled with the tablet she wasn't even using. Brandon trailed behind, nervous now. Sir, can I help you with anything? Brandon tried again, his voice a little too high. Shaq stopped at the desk, finally spoke. I'm looking for someone. Rick arrived just behind him, slightly breathless. Mr. O'Neal, Rick said, smoothing his tie. Wow, this is an honor. We had no idea you were coming in today. Shaq turned slowly, his eyes settled on Rick. Still no smile, no words. Rick's grin faded fast. If you're interested in anything, we can absolutely have our premium team set something up. Rick continued. Private room. Bottled water. Champagne if you'd like. Shaq raised one hand. Not a threat, just a gesture. Enough to stop the entire conversation mid-sentence. Rick fell silent. Where's your staff board? Shaq asked.
Rick blinked.
Staff board? Where you list the sales team. Photos. Names. Oh, back hallway. Behind the service desk. Shaq nodded once, and turned to walk. Rick followed, visibly sweating now. They reached the hallway, a corkboard lined with headshots and names. Shaq stopped in front of it, looked it over slowly. He pointed to Brandon's photo.
Was he working Monday?
Rick stammered. Yes, he was. Shaq looked at another photo. A receptionist named Kayla. Then another. Each face, each name, he processed like evidence in a trial he hadn't needed a jury for. Anyone else here from that day? He asked. Rick's throat bobbed as he swallowed. Devin, the new guy. And Kayla. Shaq turned and walked back to the showroom. The entire floor was watching now. A few customers had pulled out phones, but Devin shook his head, mouthing, "Don't." And somehow no one recorded. Shaq reached the center of the floor, stood still. The silence grew heavier. Then he spoke. When someone walks into a room and you don't recognize their face, you better recognize their presence. No one responded. Shaq let the words hang. 3 days ago, he continued, my daughter walked into this dealership. She came here to spend her own money. She didn't drop her last name. She didn't ask for a favor. She just wanted to be treated like a human being. Every breath in the room became careful. She left feeling less than one. Rick started to step forward. Mr. O'Neal, I assure you, we had no idea. I know, Shaq said calmly. That's the problem. Rick froze. Shaq's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. There are two kinds of power, he said. The kind that walks in demanding attention, and the kind that moves so quiet by the time you notice it's already changed the room. He looked around slowly, locking eyes with each of the employees he'd seen in the video Tyler sent him. Some dropped their gaze. Some didn't. I didn't come here to make a scene. I came to leave an impression. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a sleek black envelope. This is for the owner of the franchise, he said, placing it on the receptionist's desk. It outlines what comes next. No threats. No lawsuits. Just a plan. A structured correction. As he turned to leave, Devin stepped forward. Sir? Mr. O'Neal? His voice cracked a little. Shaq paused, looked at him. Devin cleared his throat. I didn't know who she was, but I saw what happened, and I should have said something. Shaq looked at him a moment longer, then nodded. You just did. He left without another word. Out through the doors. Back into the Phantom. The matte black ghost. The engine barely made a sound as it rolled out of the lot. Back inside, Rick stared at the envelope, like it was a ticking device. Brandon fumbled his words, trying to recover with a client who had now lost all interest in luxury sedans. Kayla sat down, hard, like her knees had stopped holding weight. Devin stood there, still stunned. The energy in the dealership didn't recover for the rest of the day. Because when giants move quietly, they leave echoes too heavy to ignore. Rick Donovan stood by the lobby's glass doors, sweat forming at the base of his neck. The sunlight spilled into the dealership with unapologetic brightness, lighting up every dust particle, every reflection off every polished surface. But Rick couldn't enjoy the pristine glow of his luxury showroom. Not today. Not after what just happened. Big Shaq had walked out 30 seconds ago. Not said a word on his way out. Not slammed a door. Not raised his voice. But it was like a fault line had opened under the floor and none of them were quite sure when the aftershocks would hit. And now Rick was standing frozen, staring out into the parking lot like maybe if he looked long enough, the man would return and tell him what the hell he wanted. Brandon was pacing nearby, muttering to himself in half sentences. Why didn't anyone tell me she was his daughter? Why would she even come in without... she looked like a college kid. How was I supposed to... Shut up, Rick said, without turning. Brandon fell silent. Devin stood off to the side near the espresso bar, not speaking, not blinking. He was the only one in the room who hadn't tried to talk his way out of anything. The dealership had been quiet before, when Shaq arrived. Now it was quieter still, but different. Not reverent, not respectful. It was anxious, coiled, like they were all waiting for something to drop. Rick adjusted his cuffs, trying to find a breath that didn't taste like regret. He turned to Kayla, the receptionist. Did he say anything before he left? She shook her head. No, but he left something. Rick blinked. What? She pointed to the corner of the lobby, beside the entrance to the executive offices. Rick followed her gesture. There, in a simple lucite display case, one that usually held brochures or a rotating spotlight on seasonal promotions, was a basketball. Signed, Shaquille O'Neal. Sharp black ink, against clean leather. No note. No context. Just the ball. Rick walked over slowly, looked down at it. It hadn't been there an hour ago. He hadn't seen Shaq carrying anything, hadn't noticed him place it. And yet there it sat, centered, flawless, final. He stared at it as if it might whisper instructions. Brandon joined him. It's kind of a flex, isn't it? Rick didn't answer. What do you think it means? Brandon added. Rick rubbed the back of his neck. I think it means we're not done. He turned and walked quickly toward his office, shutting the door behind him harder than necessary. He immediately reached for his phone and dialed corporate. The line rang once, then a voice answered. Cool. Controlled. Vaughn, this is Donovan. From the Ventura location. Silence. I think we have a situation. More silence. Then a dry exhale. We know. Rick's stomach dropped. You know? We were briefed this morning. Rick swallowed. Shaquille O'Neal was just here. In person. Yes, we're aware. He didn't say what he wanted. He just showed up, asked a couple questions, walked the floor, and left that ball in the lobby. Correct. What the hell is going on? Rick demanded, his voice cracking slightly. Is he suing? Is this some public ambush thing? What am I supposed to do here? You're supposed to answer your phone when we call you next, Vaughn said flatly. And in the meantime, sit still. Rick clenched his jaw. You're kidding me. This is our dealership. Our clients. My staff. Your staff, Vaughn interrupted. Insulted the daughter of one of the most recognizable, influential, and respected men in this country, and did so publicly, on camera, with no attempt to verify identity or show standard professionalism. Your staff turned away a client who arrived with the means and intent to purchase a luxury vehicle, because they made assumptions. Now Mr. O'Neal has arrived on site, not with lawyers, not with PR agents, not with security, but with silence, and you think that's a casual visit. Rick's mouth opened, but no words came out. Let me put this in terms you understand, Vaughn continued. When a man like that walks into your shop and leaves without asking for anything, it means he's already decided what's coming, and he doesn't need your input to execute it. Rick felt himself sweat through his shirt. We'll be in touch, Vaughn said. Don't speak to media. Don't post online. Don't touch the ball. Click. The line went dead. Rick stood in his office, heart pounding. He looked out the glass wall down at the lobby again. Devin was still standing there, eyes on the ball. A couple of customers glanced at it with curiosity. One even whispered, "Is that real?" Rick turned away, suddenly aware that the floor beneath him felt thinner than ever. Meanwhile, Shaq was already 20 blocks away. The city rolled by outside the Phantom like a film reel, fast but quiet. He hadn't turned the radio on, hadn't made a single call since walking out of the dealership. Just silence, just breath. In his lap sat a folded piece of paper, the internal memo Tyler had pulled about the dealership's employee conduct policy. In it, a line near the bottom: "Our client experience must reflect inclusivity, integrity, and proactive customer support at all levels of service." Shaq read it again, then folded it back. He wasn't after revenge. He was after redefinition. Quiet as it started, this was about recalibrating the scale, not punishing, correcting, and not just for Jordyn, but for every kid who would walk into places like that and get measured by surface things, like clothes or cadence or color. Back at the estate, Jordyn sat in the living room, scrolling through her phone with half focus. She hadn't said much about that day, had barely spoken to Shaq about it, even after Lucille encouraged her to, but she knew something had shifted when she woke up and saw the Phantom was gone. She knew what that meant. Her father didn't need to announce his moves. He just made them. And now she could feel one had just landed. Lucille entered the room, holding a mug of tea. "He was at that dealership this morning," she said quietly. Jordyn looked up. "You sure?" "Friend of mine drives the cleaning crew. Said he saw the car. Saw him. Said everyone inside looked like they'd seen a ghost." Jordyn chewed her lip. "Did he say anything?" Lucille shook her head. "Didn't need to." Jordyn set her phone down. "I didn't want him to get involved. I know. I wanted to handle it. I know that too. But..." Lucille sat across from her, eyes kind. "But sometimes," she said, "you don't handle things. You set a table and let the world realize who they tried to serve scraps to." Jordyn was silent.
Lucille continued, "You think power is loud because most people are loud when they get it. But real power? Real legacy? It moves without sound. Your daddy's been moving like that his whole life."
Jordyn exhaled slowly. Her anger hadn't vanished, but it had shape now. Direction. And more than anything, it had purpose. Back at the dealership, Rick was still in his office, pacing. Brandon had finally shut up. Devin had returned to his desk, headphones in, staring at a spreadsheet but not seeing a single cell. And in the lobby, the signed basketball sat untouched. Not flashy, not threatening. But in its stillness, it spoke louder than any outburst ever could. It said, "I was here. I saw everything. I know what you are. And that can't be bought." Rick Donovan's office was too quiet, the kind of silence that didn't feel restful. It felt radioactive, like something had already gone off, and now everything was waiting to see what survived the fallout. The air conditioning clicked on with a low hum, but it did nothing to cool the sweat forming at the base of Rick's spine. He sat at his desk, fingers drumming against the armrest, staring at the black lucite phone like it was a weapon aimed at him. He hadn't touched it since Vaughn's call the day before. Not a single outbound. He'd ignored emails, dodged his own staff. Even the morning sales report sat unopened in his inbox. Because Rick wasn't thinking about numbers or upgrades or customer satisfaction today. He was thinking about the ball. That damn basketball sitting in the lobby display. Still untouched. Still glowing like a live wire. He didn't understand it. Not really. Shaq had walked in like a ghost and left like a myth. No yelling. No threats. Just that. That presence. That ball. And the aftershocks hadn't stopped since. There had been whispers. Clients canceling appointments. Local press asking for comment. Even a security guard from the night shift texted him a screenshot from Reddit. "Yo, is this about the dealership? Look at the comments, bro." Now it wasn't just an incident. It was a current, and the current was moving. At 9:04 a.m., Rick's phone finally rang. Line 1. The internal line. He stared at it for 3 rings before picking up. Rick Donovan. The voice was clipped. Not Vaughn this time. Someone higher. "This is Monica Keller, legal director at Legacy Motors." Rick straightened in his seat. "Yes. Good morning. You'll be in conference room 4B at corporate headquarters today at 2:00 p.m. sharp." Rick's throat tightened. "I wasn't aware of any." "It wasn't optional. Check your email. You're on the docket. Executive investigation. Board level. Legal. Ethics and operations." Rick blinked. "Wait. Investigation?" There was a beat of silence. Then Monica said, Do you know the name Jordyn O'Neal? Rick swallowed. Yes. Do you know who her father is? He exhaled. Yes. And do you understand, she continued slowly, that this is not about a celebrity encounter gone wrong. This is about a systemic failure that landed squarely on your location, your management, and your oversight. Rick opened his mouth, then closed it again. You'll be in that room at 2 so. Monica repeated. Bring all documentation on the interaction. Camera logs, chat records, customer history. We want it all. Of course. Yes, I'll be there. She hung up without goodbye. Rick sat frozen. For years he'd climbed this ladder, managed high-end dealerships from the inside out. He knew how to handle high-maintenance clients, knew how to manage egos, gloss over awkward exchanges, keep the sales numbers clean, and the complaints buried. But this wasn't that. This was something else. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a single thought kept looping, like a skip in a vinyl track. This isn't about press. This is about principle. He stood up too fast, knocking into the corner of his desk. The pain shot up his thigh, but he barely registered it. He needed to move. By 10:30 a.m., he was inside the dealership's secure back office, scanning through security footage from the day Jordyn O'Neal had walked in. He scrubbed the timeline until he found her entrance. Pause. Play. She walked in calm, confident, alone. No celebrity theatrics. No hint of expectation. And then came Brandon. Posture cocky. Face amused. Then Rick entered. His own face. Caught in force. He paused on that frame. Him pointing toward the door. Her walking away. He watched it again. And this time he saw it. Not the gesture. Not the dismissal. The expression on her face. It wasn't rage. It wasn't weakness. It was something he didn't want to name. Disappointment. Like she had hoped for better. Expected better. And had already seen this play out before. He leaned back in the chair, feeling something cold and foreign in his gut. Guilt. By noon he was on the freeway, headed toward the corporate tower in downtown Los Angeles. The building was all sharp angles and mirrored glass, a fortress of modern capitalism. Legacy Motors took pride in appearances, and when appearances cracked, they knew how to handle the fallout, swiftly and silently. Rick entered through the executive lobby and gave his name to the front desk. The woman gave him a polite but tight-lipped smile. You're here for Yes, right this way. She led him to a high-ceilinged boardroom with matte black walls, an oblong glass table, and chairs that looked more like interrogation seats than ergonomic design. Inside were 4 people. Monica Keller, sharp in a navy suit with an open tablet in front of her. Vaughn, looking grayer than yesterday, a man in operations with a tight beard and colder eyes, and a woman from public relations who didn't smile at all. Rick sat. No handshakes. No introduction. Just silence. Then Monica spoke. We're here because your location is now the epicenter of a brand liability that affects Legacy Motors on every level. Reputation, equity, public perception, and cultural alignment. Rick nodded stiffly. The client, Jordyn O'Neal, did not disclose her last name. She was treated dismissively by staff, denied product access, escorted out. Yes, Rick said carefully. But to be clear, none of us knew who she... Stop, Monica cut in. We're not here to talk about celebrity. We're here to talk about assumption and protocol, and how a customer with verified pre-approval and payment capacity was turned away due to appearance alone. Rick's mouth went dry. Vaughn leaned forward. Do you know how many locations we've had to sweep for systemic bias reports this year? No, Rick admitted. 7. Yours is the 8th. But yours is the only one with a witness who can change public perception in a single post, and he hasn't even spoken yet. Rick sat back. This isn't about Shaq, Monica said. It's about what he represents, what his silence implies, and what the public assumes when a figure like that doesn't raise his voice. The PR rep finally spoke. Every influencer from Atlanta to LA is watching this. So are sports channels, podcasts, YouTubers. And we're not controlling the narrative. Because there is no narrative. He hasn't made one, Rick said. Exactly, she said. And that's why it's terrifying. The operations lead folded his hands. You've got 48 hours to submit a full incident report. The dealership will be closed for restructuring. Your employment is under review. And all active employees on staff that day will be interviewed by our legal and DEI teams. Rick swallowed the lump in his throat. The conversation ended 15 minutes later. No chance to plead. No stage for justification. He walked out of the building feeling 10 pounds lighter in his shoulders and 1,000 heavier in his chest. He didn't drive back to the dealership. He drove to the beach, sat on a bench near the pier, watched the waves roll in, then back out. Somewhere out there, a father had walked through his life's storms and taught his daughter how to hold her head high. Somewhere out there, that same father had decided to speak through stillness. And somehow that silence had spoken louder than Rick's entire career. The phone buzzed in his pocket. Text from Brandon. They're shutting down the floor. Customers turned away. News van parked across the street. Rick put the phone down. For the first time in a decade, he had no idea what came next. Back at the O'Neal estate, Jordyn was sitting with Lucille under the oak tree. The afternoon wind swept through the leaves gently. She looked at her phone. Opened Twitter. A trending post said, "When Shaq leaves a basketball in your lobby, you don't call your lawyer, you call your conscience." She smiled for the first time in days. His voice came through the speakers with the calm of a man who'd long learned that silence didn't mean absence. "There are moments in your life," he began, "when you realize how people really see you, not based on who you are, but based on what you look like when you walk in the room." No background music. Just words. "I've been that person. More times than you can count, and so has my daughter." There was a rustle in the audience. Some leaned forward. Others froze. Shaq continued. "She walked into your showroom, ready to buy. Not for attention. Not to flex. Just because she'd earned it. But you didn't see that. You saw something else. Or rather, you refused." A pause. "And now, you're here. To see what you missed." The lights on stage burst on. The drape pulled back. The SUV stood in full view. Sleek matte silver body, angular frame, black tinted windows, and gold accents that gleamed like authority. The hood badge, O'Neal Motors. Below it, on the front lip of the grille, embossed in brushed chrome. The crowd murmured. Some mouths dropped. Others didn't know what to say. Then the left screen lit up, showing a high-resolution video montage. Jordyn, behind the wheel, test driving on a canyon road, walking a production floor, reviewing design prototypes, laughing with engineers, a text overlay built to be seen, designed to be respected, and then finally the right screen lit up. Live feed. Jordyn O'Neal walked onto the stage, poised, centered, wearing a tailored cream pantsuit, black heels, and an expression that said everything she didn't need to say out loud. She stopped beside the SUV, took the mic from the stand, and looked straight into the room. "Good afternoon," she said. "For those who don't know me, my name is Jordyn O'Neal. I'm a co-founder and design director at O'Neal Motors, a black-owned luxury EV startup, launching in select markets this fall." A slow ripple through the room. "I was told I didn't look like someone who could afford this car." Pause. "I decided to build it instead." Silence. "You didn't see me when I walked into your showroom. So I figured it was time to make something you couldn't ignore." She turned toward the SUV, running her fingers along the edge of the door panel. "This isn't about revenge," she said, voice calm. "It's about value. It's about presence. It's about the truth that sometimes you have to build your own table when the door keeps getting closed in your face." Jordyn stepped back and let the room take her in. Rick sat motionless. Not ashamed, not even angry. Just undone. Brandon swallowed hard. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the chair. Devin sat in the back row, his eyes never leaving the stage. Respect shining through the silence. Jordyn continued. "This car, this brand, was created for those who've ever been told they're not enough. For those who walk into rooms and get sized up before they even speak. It's luxury, yes, but it's also legacy." She smiled, softly now. "My father didn't say anything the day he visited your dealership, but trust me, he said everything he needed to." Behind her, the screen displayed a still image of the basketball left in the showroom, then a close-up of the signature, then a message beneath it. "Legacy isn't what you say, it's what you leave behind." The crowd didn't clap. Not yet. They just absorbed it, like they knew they were watching something bigger than a product reveal. Something shifting beneath the surface. Then Jordyn stepped off stage. The lights rose slowly. A team of O'Neal Motors reps entered from the sides, dressed in matching black and gold uniforms, guiding people toward the floor model to get a closer look. Cameras clicked, questions buzzed, but no one from Titan Auto moved. They just sat. Front row seats. to something they never saw coming. Devon stood first, not because he felt obligated, because he understood what he was witnessing. He approached the SUV and touched the hood gently, reverently, like the object itself carried an apology. Rick didn't move. He couldn't. He just watched Jordyn from a distance, a young woman walking with assurance, confidence drawn not from ego but from lineage, a fire passed from silence to purpose, classy vengeance, no violence, just vision. Later that evening, social media would explode. Photos of the SUV, clips of Jordyn's speech, a quote card from Shaq's voiceover, hashtags, brand tags, influence without effort. And yet the most powerful image was the simplest. A still from the live feed, Jordyn, standing beside the car with her name on it, eyes fixed forward. The caption? Respect isn't given, it's built. And in that moment, everyone who had doubted her sat in the front row and learned what it looked like to be outgrown by the very person they once overlooked. 2 years ago, the boardroom didn't look like much. No marble table, no skyline views, just a plain rectangular room in an industrial park office complex on the edge of Pomona. The ceiling tiles buzzed faintly with flickering fluorescence, the chairs squeaked when you leaned too far back, and the glass door didn't shut all the way unless you pulled it hard. But that room? That's where the future changed. Shaquille O'Neal sat at the head of the table, not in a suit, not in designer frames, just a charcoal hoodie, reading glasses, and a yellow legal pad, filled with notes and a pen that clicked more often than it wrote. Across from him sat 7 executives, men and women in ties and tension, all with looks that said one thing louder than the business plans sitting in front of them. Why is he here? The company was called Corvolt Motors, a barely breathing electric vehicle manufacturer that had blown through 3 rounds of private equity and still hadn't gotten a single model into commercial release. Their prototype had been solid, performance impressive, design a little dated, but there was something there, buried deep under debt, missed deadlines, and leadership with no real imagination. What they had was a product. What they didn't have was a soul. That's where Shaq came in. The acquisition wasn't made through his celebrity brand. It wasn't on the front page of any business blog. He'd routed it through a holding company built for stealth, a quiet shell that masked his position until the time was right. He didn't want fanfare. He wanted freedom. The plan? Take a 51% controlling stake, restructure the C-suite, cancel 2 investor relations campaigns, and pivot the entire brand under a new name, O'Neal Motors. But he hadn't told them that part yet. The meeting was called for one purpose. See who blinked first. I'm not here to throw money at your problems, Shaq said, his voice calm. I'm here to build something that'll make your problems irrelevant. One of the older execs, Collings, leaned forward, fingers tented like a cartoon villain who hadn't gotten the memo. Mr. O'Neal, with all due respect, this company requires a focused growth strategy, not a motivational speaker. Shaq didn't flinch. He just looked at him for a beat, then responded with a sentence so soft it chilled the room. You keep trying to make the car fit the road, he said. I'm trying to build the highway. No one laughed. Not because it wasn't clever, but because they didn't understand it yet. What they missed was that Shaq wasn't here to fix Corvolt. He was here to outgrow it. He didn't want their name. He didn't want their slide decks. He wanted their infrastructure, their patents, their neglected facilities, the bones. Everything else was decoration. He left that meeting with 2 signatures, a handshake, and a power play still buried beneath the surface. 4 months later, the first prototype under the new O'Neal Motors directive rolled out of a redone design lab in Nevada. It was sharper, meaner, electric-powered with torque that turned heads. The nameplate on the dashboard read, Prototype J. J for Jordyn. Shaq hadn't told her yet. She was still in school, studying design with a focus on product identity. He watched her submit her projects, watched her sketch interiors in the margins of her notebooks. What others saw as electives, he saw as evidence. The girl wasn't building dreams. She was drafting blueprints. He called his lead designer one night and said, I want my daughter's fingerprints on this brand, every inch of it, but I don't want her to know it came from me. Give her a portfolio brief. Blind submission. No name. If her ideas rise, then they rise.
They did.
2 months later, her design package for the center console was voted top prototype by the entire executive team. Her layout for the sightline dip on the hood edge became a foundational design cue. Her ergonomic layout for the driver interface was so clean, They built the system OS around it. She didn't find out until the press event. But that comes later. Back then, O'Neal Motors had become real. It wasn't just a passion project. It wasn't just a pivot. It was revenge at a cellular level. Not through lawsuits, not through press releases, but through architecture. The next phase was distribution. Shaq bought 5 independent dealership lots over the course of 6 months, all in prime metro markets: Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago, DC, and Los Angeles. He kept the names quiet, didn't rename them right away, just observed, learned. And when it came time to replace the worst of them, the one in Los Angeles where staff turnover was highest, complaints were common, and profiling was as casual as coffee, he let it run its course. He waited, watched, let the termites chew through the frame, until the day Jordyn walked in. He hadn't orchestrated it. He didn't send her there. But when he found out it had happened, the timeline collapsed. The moment the ball was left on the lobby stand, the boardroom began to echo. Now, 2 years after that first shaky meeting in Pomona, the boardroom looked very different. The floor-to-ceiling windows at the O'Neal Motors headquarters overlooked the skyline. The glass conference table reflected the overhead LEDs like water. Jordyn sat at the far end now, no longer the unknown intern feeding renderings into PowerPoint decks. She was the design director. She wore the title like armor: earned, proven. Shaq sat opposite her, chair turned slightly toward the window. They were reviewing the data from the launch event. "Media impressions?" he asked. Jordyn scanned her tablet. 6.2 million across platforms. Trending in 3 cities. Engagement high, sentiment 94% positive. Orders already outpacing projections. Shaq nodded. "How's the team feeling?" "Hungry," she said. "Focused. We've got heat now, but the challenge is keeping it clean. We don't want the brand to be built on drama. We want it built on what we deliver." He looked at her for a moment, long and full of meaning. "Exactly." She clicked the tablet off. "You knew, didn't you?" "All along." Shaq gave her that half smile. "I had an idea. You didn't have to let me walk into that dealership." "I didn't let you," he said. "You walked in because you're capable. I didn't interfere because I needed to see how the world would treat you without the name. That was always the test." She didn't argue, because she knew he was right. Shaq leaned forward. "We don't fight fire with fire." Jordyn finished it with him. "We outbuild the house." The mantra. The mission. Legacy, not just for show, but for system. Outside the conference room, the O'Neal Motors staff moved like a unit. Engineers, marketers, techs, interns, all building something bigger than their roles. No one asked where Jordyn had come from anymore. They knew, not just by name, but by word. And as for the dealership, Titan Auto Gallery no longer existed. It had been stripped of license, restructured, and rebranded. The building now bore a new logo, a brushed chrome O, with a mirrored center. Inside, the same RS7 still sat unsold, a museum piece now, not for lack of quality, but for what it represented. History, misjudgment, a warning. And in its place, the floor now showcased something else. A sleek SUV, matte silver, gold trim. Under the hood, innovation. Behind the wheel, legacy. And all around it, whispers of a power that didn't come from noise, but from knowing who you are, and building until the world has no choice but to recognize it. So when I left without the car, I didn't lose anything. What I walked out with was clarity. Clarity about how I wanted to move through the world. Clarity about the difference between success and validation. Because success is doing what you came to do, no matter who's watching. Validation? That's just a mirror someone else controls. And I don't hand over mirrors anymore. That clarity became the blueprint for what you see now. A brand that doesn't just sell cars, but challenges the space they sit in. O'Neal Motors isn't just a family name. It's a promise that will build what we weren't invited into, that will lead where we were once kept waiting, and that will give respect, but will never beg for it. I know people see the headlines now, the product launch, the sales figures, the glowing articles about legacy and empowerment, but none of that started on stage. It started in silence, in private. It started when I made a decision, alone, in a parked car, to not let someone else's ignorance write my worth in ink. I wish I could say that was the first time something like this happened to me. It wasn't, and I wish I could say it'll be the last. It won't be, but here's the difference now. I know how to name it. I know how to answer it.
Not with rage, not with fire.
But with work, with strategy. with proof. I've learned that legacy isn't what you leave behind when you die. Legacy is what you live out loud while you're still here. My dad's legacy wasn't built on championships or commercials. It was built on the way he carried himself when people thought they could shrink him. On the silence he mastered so no one could use his voice against him. And on the way he showed up, consistently, humbly, when it mattered most. When I was little, he used to walk me into rooms and never say who he was. He wanted me to learn what presence meant without a name tag. He wanted me to see how people acted before they realized they were being watched. He used to say, you don't walk in to impress them, you walk in to inform them.
Now I know what that means too.
We don't walk into rooms to chase approval anymore. We walk in to shift the temperature, to make people realize that whatever they thought this space was, just changed. So no, this moment isn't revenge. It's revelation, revealing who we've always been, what we've always deserved, and what the world is finally being forced to recognize. To every person who's ever walked into a room and felt invisible, I see you. To every young woman who's ever been second-guessed for daring to act like she belongs, I believe you. And to every system that still thinks it can measure worth by surface, we're not waiting on you to change anymore. We're building beyond you. That's the real power. The kind you don't scream about. The kind you live until no one can ignore it. And if they ever try to deny it, you won't need to argue. You'll already have proven it. The envelope arrived without a return address. Handwritten. Slightly smudged ink. No branding. No company logo. Just a white, worn envelope with a name scrawled in block letters across the front. Jordyn O'Neal. O'Neal Motors HQ. Private. It sat on the assistant's desk for a day and a half, before someone slid it into a folder labeled incoming, personal. No one thought much of it. Not until Jordyn opened it herself, and saw the first line. It wasn't typed. It wasn't performative. It was written by hand, page after page, in blue ink, uneven and slightly slanted. The kind of handwriting that came from someone who hadn't done much writing lately. She didn't recognize the name at the bottom, until she reached it. By then the silence in her office had settled around her like fog. The letter read, I debated writing this 100 times. 100 drafts. 100 ways to start it. Every one of them sounded like an excuse, or worse, a performance. So this is the one I'm sending. The one that doesn't hide behind business language, or moral footnotes. I was the manager at Titan Auto Gallery the day you walked in. You remember me. I remember you too. What you may not know is what I saw after you left. Not in the showroom, not in the parking lot, but in the weeks and months that followed. In the mirror, in headlines, in the silence that filled the spaces where my title used to be. I lost my job. That's not why I'm writing. I lost my reputation. That's not why either. I'm writing because something shifted in me the moment you turned and walked out of that dealership, with your head up. That image has followed me ever since. You didn't yell, you didn't argue, but something in your silence made everything louder for me. And it didn't stop echoing. It started when I got called into corporate. They laid out the footage, played the audio back. I heard myself, saw myself. And for the first time in years, I actually listened. I listened how I said the words. I watched the way I moved. I saw the dismissiveness, the impatience that had become so habitual. I didn't even feel it anymore. But it was there. You saw it. And worse, you'd felt it before. I could tell. That wasn't just policy. That was me. You see, I used to believe I was fair, that I didn't treat people differently, that I didn't carry those quiet biases they talk about on the news. But I did. Maybe not with hatred, but with assumption. I assumed you were wasting my time. I assumed you weren't serious. I assumed you were walking in to test a space that didn't belong to you. But none of that was about you. It was about what I hadn't fixed in myself. And for the first time, I can say that plainly. I grew up in a house where we didn't talk about race. Not out loud. Not in any meaningful way. We just knew things. Things that were passed down in phrases, in glances, in warnings about neighborhoods, and certain types of people. And those things grow up with you, even when you think you've outgrown them. I worked hard, built a name for myself. But somewhere along the way, I started believing the lie that hard work made me objective. It didn't. What it made me was blind. Blind to the rooms I was protecting. Blind to the people I was pushing out without ever touching them. And I didn't see it. Not until you. Not until you didn't demand anything from me. Not until you just walked out and left me standing there, suddenly aware of how small I really was. You didn't even know my name, but I knew yours the next morning. Everyone did. And then came the calls. The closed-door meetings. The PR damage. The emails from the top. But none of that was what stuck with me. What stuck with me was that you never said my name either. Not one. You let me vanish into the shadow of my own actions. I've been out of work since. Not on paper, but in spirit. I've interviewed, networked, made phone calls. But something's different now. And I'm not talking about the Google search results. I'm talking about the weight. The reckoning. The mirror. I don't want pity. I don't want a second chance. I want to tell you the truth.
I didn't think people like you belonged in places like that.
And now I realize. I did. Because if I had, I would have seen you. I would have respected you. I would have asked your name, not just your purpose. I don't know what your father taught you growing up. But whatever it was, I see it in how you handled all of this. The silence. The poise. The clarity. He didn't raise someone angry. He raised someone awake. And now I'm trying to wake up too. I read the interviews, watched your speech, saw the SUV reveal. I watched you stand on that stage with the same calm you walked into my dealership with. Only this time, everyone listened. You didn't take my job away. You made me realize I was never really doing it right to begin with. I don't expect you to reply. I don't expect you to forgive. But I needed you to know that I see it now. I see you, and I see myself. And for the first time, that doesn't make me defensive. It just makes me quiet. Respectfully, Jordyn folded the letter once. Then again. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She didn't say a word. She just placed it in a drawer in her desk labeled personal hold. Not because she needed to carry it with her, but because some moments don't ask for applause or replies. They just ask to be understood. Later that week, she found herself walking past the original RS7, the one she'd never gotten to drive. It still sat in the corner of the new showroom, untouched, unsold, a silent monument. Devin had suggested they keep it on the floor, not to glorify the memory, but to ground it. Next to it sat a small plaque, mounted without ceremony. The car we didn't buy. The lesson we did. Jordyn stopped for a moment, staring at it, then kept walking, not away from it, but beyond it. Because the truth is, some people change because they get pushed. Others change because they finally stop running from the mirror. Rick's letter wasn't a redemption arc. It was an acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's all legacy needs. A quiet confession, a moment of recognition, and the courage to write something you once refused to see. He'd seen that kind of reckoning before.
Not in headlines.
In men. Men who'd finally stopped trying to win arguments and started trying to understand themselves. That kind of evolution didn't need applause. It just needed to happen. Shaq stepped out of the rolls and stood near the edge of the overlook, arms folded. The breeze tugged gently at his shirt. Below, the city buzzed, oblivious to the man who had changed the game without stepping into a single press war. He remembered being 19, walking into his first dealership with a down payment in hand, full of pride. He remembered how the man behind the desk looked up at him, then past him, told him to come back with someone who could sign for him. He'd left quietly that day too. But the quiet had never been empty. It had been filing something, fueling something. Now here he was, decades later, driving through the same strip that once measured him in whispers, now whispering his name through every turn of its gates. He stepped back into the car, pressed the ignition. The rolls came alive. No honk, no sound. Because when you've moved the world with silence, horns feel unnecessary. On the way home, a young man in a red Tesla rolled up beside him at a light. He glanced over, recognized the car, squinted, eyes widened. He rolled his window down, gave a respectful nod. Shaq rolled his window down half an inch. The young man smiled. Big Shaq? Shaq met his eyes, then said nothing. Just nodded once. The light turned green. The rolls didn't jump ahead. It glided. Because men who know who they are don't need to race. When he pulled into the driveway of the estate, the gates opened automatically. The house was quiet. Lucille was on the porch, watering plants. She looked up as he passed, raised 2 fingers in greeting. He parked, took a breath, turned the car off. He stepped out, not like a man returning from a mission, but one returning home from a long walk through what used to be enemy territory, now repaid. Lucille handed him a towel. You look like you were thinking, she said. I was. Good thoughts? True ones. She nodded. You hungry? Not yet. Then sit. They sat together on the porch, no conversation. Just the soft creak of old wood, and the hum of a city still learning its own story. The Rolls-Royce sat in the driveway, gleaming under the early evening sun, still, unbothered. A monument not to wealth, but to restraint. Because some men make statements with sound. Others, they become the silence that never leaves the room. If this story hit you deeper than just headlines, you're in the right place. Stick around. We don't chase clout, we chase clarity. Where silence speaks, legacy moves, and stories like this keep unfolding. Because some journeys don't end. They echo. And trust us, the next one's already in motion.